You can't just walk in here and expect a dog," snapped the receptionist, barely looking up from her clipboard. Her name tag read Paula, and her voice echoed off the cold tile walls of the downtown shelter. Sharp and tired, standing on the other side of the desk. 14-year-old Alara Mace flinched, her shoulders tightening beneath an oversized coat that didn't quite belong to her. A worn backpack hung off one side, the zipper broken, and a folded legal document poked out from a front pocket. "I'm not just expecting one," Alara said quietly, her eyes steady, though her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the strap of her bag. "I came to adopt." Paula sighed and looked up now, really seeing the girl for the first time, not just a walk-in, but a ghost of someone else's wreckage. Her lips parted, then closed again. She softened, just slightly. "You'll need a guardian. Someone to sign off." "You can't. I have the paperwork. I'm in transitional custody with the state. I have permission." The shelter lobby fell quiet except for the humming, fluorescent lights above and the low whine of a dog from behind the glass door leading to the kennels. Paula reached out for the papers, scanning them quickly, her brows furrowed. "You're staying at Pinehaven?" Alara nodded. Pinehaven. The group home at the edge of town that most people pretended not to see. The kind of place where birthdays came and went without cake, where dreams were written in pencil and always got erased. Paula stood and motioned her toward the back. "Come on, let's see who's left." The kennels were colder than the lobby. Concrete floors, chain-link enclosures, stainless steel bowls with yesterday's names on masking tape, and eyes. So many eyes watching her. Barking erupted as they entered, row by row, tails wagging, paws scratching metal. A golden retriever pressed against the gate. A pit mix barked wildly. Small chihuahua curled into a ball in the corner. But none of them held her gaze. Not until the fourth enclosure he was quiet. Huge, a dark-coated German shepherd with frost around the muzzle and a scar down the side of his face. He sat perfectly still, regal and wrecked, his ears pricked. Eyes locked on her. Elara stopped walking. "That's Gable," Paula said softly, as if the dog demanded silence. "Found him 6 months ago after his handler died. Retired K9. Nobody's been able to get close to him since. He won't eat when people are around. Doesn't bark, doesn't move." But Gable was moving now. Slowly, deliberately. He stood and stepped forward. His tail didn't wag, his body didn't tremble. He simply approached the bars and sat again, inches from Alara. His gaze never wavered. "He's looking at you like he knows you," Paula whispered. Alara didn't respond. Her breath caught in her throat. She dropped her bag and knelt, just outside the fence. And then, Gable did something no one had seen in 6 months. He lowered his head, and whimpered. A deep, broken sound, more like memory than pain. Paula froze. Alara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded photo. It was old, grainy. A man in uniform, her father. Beside him a younger version of Gable, both of them smiling. "This dog," Alara whispered, eyes wet now. "This dog used to serve with my dad. He died in the fire 2 years ago, and no one ever told me what happened to his partner." Gable let out a sound that didn't belong in this world. Some cross between a cry and a call. Alara pressed her forehead to the fence. "I came to take you home." And for the first time since her world fell apart, someone, something, answered back. Gable didn't bark. He didn't move like a dog meeting a stranger. He stood in front of Alara as if she were a long-lost part of a life he had almost given up on remembering. His chest rose and fell slowly, eyes fixed on her as though every second spent apart had returned in a flood of memory. Behind them, the shelter faded into silence. Even the other dogs seemed to sense the weight in the room. Alara sat back, on her heels, staring at him. She wasn't crying exactly, but her eyes shimmered, brimming with something deeper, a hollow, aching recognition. In that quiet, she remembered a different house, a different time. Her father's boots by the door, the way he'd come home after long shifts, the dog always at his side, and how Gable, younger and stronger then, had leaned his head into her lap while she read. Her mother had left before those memories took shape, and when the fire came, there had been no one left to remember with her. No one but Gable. Paula didn't speak, but she took a step closer, keeping her voice low. "Are you sure it's the same dog?" Alara nodded. "He has the scar. My dad used to say it came from a window jump during a warehouse bust," said Gable. Didn't hesitate. "Saved 3 lives that day." She looked up at Paula. 2 dogs like him. The shelter worker knelt beside her, hesitant. "He hasn't let anyone near him, not for months. But if he remembers you, ... Alara unlatched the gate slowly, her fingers unsteady. Paula reached out, but Alara shook her head. "If he wants me here, he'll let me in." The gate creaked open, and Gable didn't move. He stood, dignified, but his eyes shimmered with something not unlike grief. Alara stepped inside. No leash, no barrier, just faith. She knelt in front of him, heart pounding, and extended a hand. "Hi, old boy," her voice cracked. "You remember me, don't you?" Gable closed the distance between them and pressed his forehead gently into her chest. Alara wrapped her arms around his thick neck, her face buried in his fur, and for the first time in what felt like years, she didn't feel like a girl nobody had claimed. Paula looked away, blinking fast. The adoption was rushed through that same afternoon. Exceptions were made, backgrounds confirmed. And when Paula handed over the final papers, she gave Ilara a look that held no pity, only respect. "Take care of each other," she said, and Ilara nodded, her hand resting gently on Gable's shoulder. Pinehaven was no place for a dog, especially not one like Gable, that he didn't seem to mind the cracked linoleum floors or the tight space she called her room. He curled up by her bed, close but alert, every sound outside the walls drawing his ears. He was a protector again, and she was no longer alone, but it didn't take long before something strange began to happen. Gable would wake in the middle of the night and stand by the door, muscles tense, not barking, just staring, watching as though someone or something were on the other side. At first, Ilara thought it was the noise. Pinehaven wasn't quiet. Fights happened. Doors slammed, kids came and went at odd hours, but Gable's intensity was different. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Then came the day Ilara dropped her backpack on the floor and Gable lunged, not at her but at the bag. He barked once, sharp and defensive, then circled it as if it were dangerous. Ilara opened it slowly, startled. Inside, next to her notebooks, was a small digital recorder she hadn't touched in months, something from a therapy session the state had required. She pressed play. Her younger voice crackled through the speaker. "I just remember screaming. Smoke. My dad was yelling for someone. Not me, I think. I think he was trying to get someone out." Gable stiffened. He growled low in his throat, then whimpered. Ilara stopped the recording. "What is it?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. "What do you know?" She'd always been told her father had died saving people, but there were gaps, a missing 2-minute window no one could explain. They'd never found the full audio logs from his last shift. No one ever talked about his final call. That night, Ilara pulled out the old photograph again, the one with her dad and Gable. But something caught her attention this time. In the background, partially cut off, was another figure. A man. Name, no badge. Just a vague blur of a person she hadn't noticed before. She stared at it for a long time, then looked at Gable. "Who was he?" she asked quietly. Gable stared at the picture, then looked away. In the weeks that followed, Ilara began to dig, with the help of a quiet librarian named Mr. Halbridge, one of the few adults who treated her like she mattered. She started pulling old news articles, police records, obituaries. Her name kept coming up. Officer Clay Dermott, her father's partner, supposedly died the same night. But there was no official death certificate, no funeral. Just ... vanished. Elra brought the name up one evening, casually while Gable was lying beside her. Clay Dermott. The dog growled. It wasn't just a growl, it was guttural, wounded, the sound of betrayal. Ilara leaned in, heart racing. "What did he do?" she asked. And Gable, this animal no one could reach, no one could calm, stood, walked to the door, and scratched once. Then he looked back. He wanted her to follow, and for the first time, Ilara realized Gable hadn't just remembered her. He had come back for something else. Something unfinished, something buried in the fire, something that was still alive. The sound of Gable's nails against the door was soft but insistent. He wasn't pacing like an anxious dog. He was waiting, alert, composed, and resolute. Ilara stared at him from across the room, her mind racing. Everything she'd believed about that night, about the fire, about the man her father had died beside, it was cracking at the edges. "Where do you want me to go?" she whispered, rising slowly. Gable didn't respond. He simply turned toward the hallway. It was nearly midnight. Pinehaven was mostly quiet, save for the occasional cough or the distant buzz of an old fluorescent light. Ilara slipped on her shoes and grabbed her coat, careful not to draw attention. With one hand on Gable's collar and the other gripping the photo she'd stuffed into her pocket, she moved like she was walking out of a dream. They passed the office. The staff had long since gone home. Only the night shift remained, usually asleep in the lounge. Ilara didn't stop to check. By the time they reached the side exit, her heart was thudding so loud she was sure someone would hear it, but no one came. Outside, the cold air bit her cheeks, but Gable didn't hesitate. He pulled forward, nose close to the ground but not sniffing like a regular dog. Tracking his gait was purposeful. He wasn't looking for something. He knew where he was going. They walked for 15 minutes through dimly lit back streets, past shuttered storefronts and cracked sidewalks, the city feeling both familiar and strange. Ilara stayed close behind, half running to keep up. Every so often, Gable would glance back to make sure she was there, not like a dog asking permission, like a soldier checking on a teammate. They finally stopped in front of a rundown auto repair shop on the east end of town. The sign was rusted, the windows dark. Dermott's Auto. It read barely legible under the dirt and grime. Breath caught in her throat. She hadn't known what she expected, but not this. Not a place with that name in bold letters still hanging above the door like it belonged. The shop looked closed, but a light was on in the back, faint flickering. Ilara pressed her palm to the glass, peering through the smudged surface. She couldn't see much, just the shape of a man at a workbench, hunched and moving slowly, his head down. Gable let out a low, nearly silent growl. Not angry, not frightened, controlled, focused. Dark, "Is that him?" she whispered. "Clay Dermot." She didn't know what she was asking if Gable could nod or answer, but he stared at the light, ears sharp, body still. There was no doubt in his posture. Something about the shop didn't make sense. If Dermot had died in the fire, what was he doing here, hiding behind a mechanic sign? And why had no one ever mentioned him since? Suddenly, the back door opened. The man stepped out into the alley, tossing a trash bag over his shoulder. He moved stiffly, favoring one side, his back to them. Alara squinted in the dark. Gray hair, broad shoulders, a faded jacket with a worn patch, a police unit emblem long since retired. Gable tensed, and then, without warning, he took a step forward and barked. Just once, loud and unmistakable. The man froze. The bag hit the ground with a dull thud. He turned slowly, eyes wide, and then he saw them. Saw her, saw him. His face drained of color. He rasped, as if saying the name woke something in him that had been buried. "You, ... You're his daughter." She stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You were supposed to be dead." Clay Dermot swallowed hard. "They think I am. Why?" Her voice rose now, pain bubbling to the surface. "Why disappear? Why leave him behind?" He didn't answer right away. He looked down at Gable, who was now standing perfectly still between them. The dog's eyes burned into him like judgment itself. "I didn't leave him," Clay said finally. "We were ambushed that night. The call came in about a warehouse fire, but it wasn't just arson. There were people inside, armed, trapped, maybe on purpose, maybe not. We didn't know. Your father went in first with Gable. I followed, but someone was waiting. I got hit ... hard. Thought I wasn't going to make it." He paused, jaw clenched. "Next thing I remember, I woke up 2 days later in a private clinic. Off the grid. I'd been rescued, or so I thought. But it wasn't paramedics who found me. It was someone else. A man who told me the explosion was bigger than expected, that your father died a hero, and that the people behind it didn't want anyone digging." Elira's hands were fists now. "So you let him die a ghost. You let me think he'd just gone down saving strangers." Clay looked at her with eyes that were equal parts guilt and wariness. "I wanted to come back, but I was warned, told, if I resurfaced, you'd be in danger too. I didn't know who to trust. I thought disappearing would protect you." Alara shook her head, the tears finally spilling over. "You let me grow up in a group home. You let his partner, his best friend, vanish like a coward." He took a step forward, regret etched deep into his face. "Ilara, I didn't have a choice." But Gable moved first. The dog lunged, not to bite, but to stand between them, his body a wall of fury and defense. He barked again, louder now, forcing Clay back a step. And then he turned his head slightly, glancing at Ilara with eyes that asked her the same question she'd been asking herself. What now? She took a breath and stepped forward, her voice low, steel beneath the sorrow. "You do have a choice now. Tell me everything, no more secrets, or I walk away, and Gable and I finish what my dad started without you." Clay looked at her, then at the dog. He hesitated, then nodded once. "Come inside," he said quietly. "There's more you need to see. Your father left something behind." And with that, the girl who'd come to adopt a forgotten dog walked into the shadows of a man who was never meant to be alive. The auto shop smelled like oil and old regrets, the air was heavy with dust and time, and everything inside looked like it had stopped moving the day her father died. Rusted tools, shelves lined with spare parts, an old cot in the corner with a folded blanket. Clay Dermot didn't lead them toward the light. Instead, he walked through the garage and stopped at a locked metal cabinet pressed flush against the back wall. His hands hesitated on the key. "He made me promise," Clay said, voice low and brittle. "If anything happened to him, if he didn't make it, I was to keep this safe, hidden." He never trusted the department. Said too many things were getting buried back then, the warehouse, the surveillance footage, all of it. Ilara's mouth was dry. "You kept it here all this time." Clay gave her a glance, not defensive, not defiant, just tired. "I've been keeping a lot of things, Ilara. Most of them I didn't want to remember." He turned the key and opened the cabinet. Inside, sealed in a fireproof box, were several items: a thick manila envelope, a black USB drive taped to a piece of paper, and a small cloth bag tied with a navy blue cord, the kind police officers sometimes used to hold mementos they couldn't explain to their families. Clay pulled the envelope out first and handed it to her. "Read this." Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. The paper inside was covered in her father's handwriting, some of it familiar, the way he used to leave her notes in her lunchbox back when she was small. This wasn't like that. It was dense. "Confessional. If you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. I need you to understand something. The fire was no accident. It was bait. We were sent in blind, told it was just a building fire, maybe vagrants inside. But that wasn't the truth. That warehouse was a front, a data drop site. Someone inside our own department had been selling. That's federal intel. I found out too late." Alara's fingers clenched around the page. Clay watched her, but said nothing. "I was working with someone. Only a few people knew. I'd started building a case, keeping the files off the grid, even from command. I hid copies. Gable and I were tracking movement patterns through the security Teams, I think we were close to close. That night, I told Clay what I found. I trusted him to carry the last piece, just in case I didn't make it. Her throat tightened. She looked up, voice nearly breaking. What piece? Clay reached for the USB drive. It's encrypted. Your dad used an off-site military key I don't have access to, but the metadata is still there. Names, dates, files, marked classified. The kind of stuff people don't kill over unless they're really afraid. Gable was lying near the cot now, watching both of them. His ears twitched slightly when Clay moved. He didn't growl, but the tension hadn't left his body. Why? Now Alara asked, why lead me here? You could have stayed gone. You were safe. Clay looked down. Because he didn't just leave that data for me to protect, he left it for you. Said if anything happened, you'd know who to trust. And I figured out what that meant the moment Gable found you. The words landed like stone. Alara looked at the dog, her companion, her only connection to a life lost too soon. Gable hadn't just recognized her. He had chosen her. He remembered, she whispered. He remembered Dad, me, and the case. Clay nodded. That dog's to seen things no one else ever did. You're the only one he came for. Ilara's head spun. She sat down slowly on the old stool near the workbench, the envelope still in her lap. If we go to the police now, will they even believe us? Clay didn't answer right away. He sat across from her, hands clasped, shoulders drawn inward. They'll believe parts of it. But the names on that drive, some of them are still in uniform. Some hold rank. If we walk in there blind, we're the next ones on the list. A silence stretched between them. Finally, Clay spoke again. But your father had one more idea. A backup plan. He stood and walked over to a filing cabinet, rifling through folders before pulling out an old Polaroid photo. He made a copy of the drive. Hid it inside something personal. Not in evidence, not on the cloud. A place no one would ever look. He turned the photo over. On the back, written in faded ink, St. Agatha's Locker 12. Ilara blinked. The church, he nodded. Your father used to volunteer at the shelter they ran, said it gave him perspective. He kept a locker there under a different name. It was one of his escape plans. He thought if everything ever went sideways, that's where someone like you might go looking. She stared at the photograph. A second copy. A chance to finish what he started. Maybe even clear his name. Outside, the wind had picked up. A low, hollow whistle moved through the cracks in the building. Gable stood now, ears raised. Something had shifted. Someone's coming, Clay said, moving to the door. Headlights swept across the shop windows. A car, unfamiliar. Too slow to be casual. Too late at night to be harmless. Clay turned to Alara. His voice clipped. We have to go now. Alara grabbed the photo, the envelope, and the drive. Gable was already at the door, alert and ready. No leash, no hesitation. As they slipped out the back into the alley, Clay paused just long enough to glance at Alara. You ready for what's next? She didn't hesitate. I've been waiting my whole life. And this time she wasn't running away. From the past, she was chasing it down. The hallway inside St. Agatha's shelter was quiet, dimly lit by flickering sconces that hadn't been updated in decades. The building smelled faintly of old wood and hand sanitizer, and somewhere down the corridor someone was humming a lullaby to a restless child. It was nearly dawn now, the sky outside barely hinting at light, and Alara hadn't slept. Not that she could. Not when her hands gripped the photo of Locker 12 like it was a lifeline to the version of her father no one had let her remember. Clay moved ahead of her, checking corners with instincts he hadn't shaken. Gable walked at her side, steady and quiet, eyes sharp as ever. Every so often he looked up at her as if making sure she still had the strength to finish what her father had started. She did. It was the only thing keeping her standing. 12 was buried at the far end of the shelter's basement, past old office rooms and rows of folded bedding. It didn't look like much. Dented metal, rust along the latch, but Alara didn't need it to shine. She just needed it to open. Her fingers hovered above the lock. It wasn't secured, just shut tight from years of disuse. She took a breath, then pulled it open. Inside, wrapped in a waterproof canvas pouch, was a hard drive sealed with electrical tape. Beneath it, a stack of neatly folded papers. At the very bottom, a photograph. Her father holding her, no more than 5 years old. Gable beside them. Both of them were laughing, not posing, not stiff or formal, just living. Alara knelt slowly, the weight of the moment pressing hard against her chest. This wasn't just a drive, it was a confession, a gift, a warning, a final message from a father who had planned for the worst and somehow still believed in the best. Clay crouched beside her. That's it. That's everything. Gable barked once, not loudly, but with purpose, and stepped forward to sniff the drive. Alara looked down at him and smiled softly. You never forgot, did you? She whispered. Not me, not him, not any of it. They didn't stay long. The sky was beginning to glow pale orange when they exited through the side door. Clay called in a contact from out of state, someone he trusted in federal internal affairs, someone who owed him more than one favor. He didn't tell Alara much, only that they had a clear channel now. that the truth would be seen, that the rot inside the department would finally be exposed. But even then, she knew this wasn't about headlines or arrests, not really. It was about something quieter, something she'd carried alone for too long. The unanswered silence of a man who died without explanation. The ache of being forgotten in the system. The dog who showed up, not as a pet, but as the only living witness to a truth too many people had buried back at Pinehaven. Alara stood outside the chain-link gate with Gable at her side. Clay had stayed behind, saying there were still calls. To make, people to warn. He said it with eyes full of apology, but not cowardice. She told him she understood. In truth, she did. He had disappeared once, yes, but this time, he'd stayed when it mattered most. The shelter director met her at the door, lips pressed in surprise at the sight of her returning so late or so early with a dog at her side and shadows under her eyes, but she didn't ask questions. Not after Alara handed her a fresh set of guardianship papers, signed by Clay Dermott himself. Emergency authorization, permanent placement. Official. You found him, the director said softly. The one you were looking for. Alara nodded, looking down at Gable. No, he found me. In the weeks that followed, everything began to shift. Quietly, carefully. The investigation moved forward under layers of protection. Names were released, files surfaced. Some people were arrested, others resigned. Her father's reputation was restored, though the news cycle didn't dwell long. Heroes in old uniforms rarely stayed in the spotlight, but Alara didn't need the world to remember him because Gable did each day. He walked with her through the halls of Pinehaven, along the fence line at dusk, down to the nearby park where she sometimes read aloud to no one in particular. He listened, he always had, and when she cried, he leaned into her side, still impatient, like he understood grief wasn't something that passed, just something you learned to carry better with time. One evening, weeks later, she sat on the small bench under the oak tree near the back of the home. The sky was streaked with pink and violet. Gable rested beside her, head on his paws. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the old photograph again. Her father, herself, Gable, and behind them, unseen then but unmistakable now, the courage to trust again, you know, she said, quietly, looking down at the dog. He always used to say you weren't just a partner, you were family. I didn't understand what that meant, not back then. Gable raised his head slightly, ears tilted. But I do now, she said, voice catching in her throat. He left you for me, and me for you. We were the only two he trusted to finish the story. The wind rustled the tree above them. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed faintly and faded. Alara leaned back, closing her eyes. She had no illusions that everything was fixed. The world didn't work that way. But for the first time in years, she felt whole. Not because the truth had been found, but because someone had believed she could find it. Her father, her dog, herself, and in the fading light, with Gable's steady breath beside her, Alara Mace finally understood what it meant to be found, not by blood, or law, or name, but by love that never forgot.